Chris Burres is the co-founder and chief science officer with MyVitalC. He's also a podcaster, SEO expert, mechanical engineer, improv comedian. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you so much for having me, George. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you. Tell us a little bit about your personal life, some more about your work, and why you do what you do.
Wow. So I ended up in a unique place where I am a health supplement guy, and this is not a place that I ever thought I would be, and that has actually thrown me into being and becoming a longevity expert, which is also something that I never anticipated on being. To go back, in 1985, three scientists here in Houston, that's where I'm based, discovered the third form of carbon. So we're all familiar with diamond, we're familiar with graphite. The third form of carbon is a whole collection of molecules called fullerenes. The most abundant one is a buckyball. It looks like a soccer ball. If you imagine the lines on the soccer ball represent the bonds between the carbon atoms. You have the spherical molecule of 60 carbon atoms. They discovered it in 85. The scientists who discovered it actually won the Nobel Prize in 1996, short 11 years from discovery to being awarded the Nobel Prize. I started my company with my business partner in 1991, so even before the Nobel Prize was awarded. And interestingly, in 1991, all 10 of the 10 most referenced scientific papers were on fullerenes, were on this buckyball. So it really was a viral discovery in the scientific community. The molecule is amazing. It makes better inks, better batteries, better photocells, and better tires. And they actually thought the molecule would be toxic because of some of the shapes on the exterior of that soccer ball cage. And so they threw it in a toxicity study. And instead of being toxic, and in fact, my company, my lab, provided the material were mentioned in that original study. Instead of being toxic, the test subjects that they gave it to, in this case, it was Wistar rats, lived 90% longer than the control group. That's the single longest longevity experimental result in history, and it's peer-reviewed, published research, the kind of research that you would hang your hat on if you're debating if this is something that you might be interested in trying. So that was published in the middle of 2012. 2013, people start calling my office and saying, hey, how much should I be consuming? You have to think of me as a carbon nanomaterial scientist. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're asking me how much of this material that we sell to research institutions around the world to put into inks, batteries, tires, and photocells, how much of that should you consume? Approximately zero. In fact, we added not for human consumption to our labeling in mid 2013. So that was from founding of the company in 1991 until mid 2013. We didn't have to have not for human consumption on our labeling. We added then. Fast forward, a guy with a really big YouTube following starts talking about all the benefits he's getting, taking that product on a daily basis. Our phone starts ringing 10 times a week. We ask ourselves kind of the important questions. The first is a moral question. Am I comfortable selling it? I take it, my wife takes it, everybody on our team takes it. By the way, that's not a requirement to work on our team. And then the other one is you've got the legal issues of the FDA and the FTC, and we're dotting all the dots, I's, crossing all the T's, and so now we actually brought this to market in about 2018.
Who knew?
That's a lot. I think that may have been the shortest span that I've ever thrown that story together.
I think it was really well done. So
thank you.
What is the name of it again?
We call it ESS 60.
And how do we get ESS 60? Where do we get it from?
Yeah, so ESS 60 is a naturally occurring molecule. So I think that's pretty important. If you take the soot of a candle, right, and you collect that soot, and typically you would do that by putting a cold steel plate over that candle flame, you'll get a black powder on that steel plate. That black soot has parts per million, parts per billion of this ESS 60 molecule. And so we've all been exposed to it. We've just been exposed to it at really low quantities. The way we make it is we actually vaporize 2 graphite rods in a reactor. That reactor needs to be devoid of oxygen. So we've got to vacuum out all the oxygen, replace it with an inert gas, vacuum out that again, because you really can't have any oxygen in there. And then you actually run that reaction at a slight vacuum with, like I said, with no oxygen. That creates a soot. And this material is kind of expensive. That's why we're not using it in industrial applications yet. But that vaporization of the graphite converts it into a soot. That soot has, on a good day, 10% fullerenes. Now, fullerenes aren't one molecule. They're a whole gamut of molecules. The one I mentioned, we call it ESS60 if you're going to consume it. Looks like the soccer ball shape. That's the most abundant. And then you have C70, carbon 70. So that's 70 molecules. It looks a little bit more like a rugby shape. And then you got 76, 84, all on up. I mean, it can go indefinite. I mean, there's a limitation of, you know, how practical is it for Mother Nature to put it together. But ostensibly could go significantly higher. That soot, again, from vaporizing the graphite rods, has 10% fullerenes. About 85% of that is the ESS60 molecule that we're after. So now we've got really, you've got 90% junk, right? And you've got 10% something useful. We separate that material, and I don't know how science we want to get, but we separate that material and then we isolate that individual ESS molecule, ESS60 molecule, and then that gets dissolved in olive oil. And then that is our product. That's the product that we sell. That was the formulation that was used with the Wistar rats in that original study.
So I've got all these images of panning for gold and coffee getting made through a filter. How do you actually isolate the ones you want and keep out the ones you don't want?
Well, if you think about the panning for gold, one of the things that's certainly true is we were extremely dirty. So the soot that comes out of that machine, you can actually, it has a parallel to ink toner. And if you were to drop a handful of it, almost nothing would hit the ground because it's just so light and fluffy that it would just disperse into the air, right? So we actually had a room that we used to go into. It was a plastic room to try and keep the rest of the facility from being covered in black soot. And I wrote a book. The book is called Live Longer and Better. And it's about this story and about the health benefits of this molecule. And so, yeah, that was certainly a parallel that we had this this kind of dirty look like an old gold panner. The separation process actually uses a solvent. It works this way. So imagine you've got sugar and sand and you want to separate those two. You would dissolve that, or you would put it in water, and the sugar would dissolve into the water and the sand would not dissolve into the water. And then you would filter it and the sand would stay on top of the filter and the sugar would go through in solution. In our case, we use a solvent, and that solvent does the exact same thing as the water. It dissolves the fullerenes. They go through the filter. The carbon junk, we actually just call it carbon crap because we just have to deal with it and throw it away. That carbon crap stays on top of the filter. And then in solution, the fullerenes go through. Just like if you wanted to recover the sugar, you would boil off the water. We boil off our solvents, and now you have a black powder that is the fullerene mixture. And then you actually use a chromatography process to separate out the ESS60 from the other fullerenes. And then again, you have to boil off the solvent, and then that's the material that we call ESS60 that gets dissolved into the olive oil. And so our product tastes, I mean, we sell it in different oils, but our product tastes like olive oil. It's 99% olive oil because we can't get very much of that ESS60 molecule to dissolve into it. And so it's, if you like a good quality olive oil, which will leave a peppery flavor at the back of your throat, then you will like our product. If you don't like that, and kind of the Western cultures that aren't used to consuming a lot of olive oil, they learn to like it. They're not necessarily fond of it on day one. But the great thing is you just take a sip of water and there's no residual flavor or kind of burping up throughout the day. That does not occur.
How did you land on olive oil?
That's a great question. Really, I mean, we're a science-based organization, and that original study where the rats lived 90% longer, and I'll talk about that study a little bit more, which is interesting. So a typical Wistar rat lives out to about 32 months, and they have a known amount of tumor mass in their bodies, right? So the longer they live, the more tumor mass they get in their bodies. Even though the MyVitalC rats lived out to 62 months, again, a full 90% longer than the typical Wistar rat, none of them had any tumors. Now, I tell the story kind of regularly, and people are like, oh, it's a cure for cancer. And like the answer to that is no. Like, no. There's a huge difference between dealing with a cancer that has metastasized and being a cancer preventative. We know things as simple as good exercise, good nutrition, good sleep are cancer preventatives. What that piece of the study suggests, and it suggests it fairly strongly, and we've got other testimonials that seem to support it, is that it can work well as an anti as a tumor preventative, as a tumor preventative.
Why do the rats get so many tumors naturally?
So it's actually a study. It's a feature of those studies. Wistar rats are designed that way, right? So they have like they're a P, I believe they're a P52 knockout rat. So the gene that is a tumor suppressant is taken out, and it's kind of like our material acts as if you had put the B52 gene back into the rat.
Interesting. So does the olive oil actually come like a traditional olive oil, or does it come in a capsule?
So we sell it typically in small, like 120 ml bottles. That's right at a 30-day serving. A typical serving is 5 mils. You can take it directly. I take it directly. Then we also sell it in little ampules. We've got little plastic ampules. So it's just 5 mils or 1 teaspoon in one. You actually tear off the top and drink it. It's really good for traveling. We also do gel caps. If you don't like that flavor at all, you can take the gel caps. So, and my typical routine is, are you familiar with Bulletproof Coffee?
I am.
So Bulletproof Coffee, as you know, has coffee, it's got MCT, and then it's got ghee. I take the ghee out, a lot of calories that I'm not interested in, but I do like the MCT. And we actually sell our ESS 60 molecule in MCT oil. So I'll do a coffee with our MCT. It's really fascinating. So you'll know, having made Bulletproof Coffee, that MCT is a clear liquid. When you take this black powder and you put it into the clear liquid, it turns a beautiful purple color. It's just how the molecule interacts with different solvents. In this case, the MCT oil is the solvent. And so while that's mixing, right, because it's water-based, it's coffee, and then you're adding oil. So I've got a little blender that's going, and I put about 1.5 teaspoons into my coffee. Then I'm taking about 1.5 teaspoons of our olive oil product while that's blending. And then for lunch, I'm typically having a salad, and for that, I'll put a little bit of our avocado product in my salad.
Nice. And you probably already answered this question, and I understand that the rats live 90% longer. What is the hoped benefit of me taking it?
Oh, what is okay? So this is really interesting. So I mentioned, like in about 2013, people started calling us and saying, how much should I take? We had not for human consumption. From 2013 to 2018, so the latter part of 2017, really, we're getting 1 to 2 phone calls a week. And this is people telling us amazing testimonials, right? And it's kind of tongue in cheek, where they're like, hey, my knee pain is gone. And we're like, you mean the knee pain of your rat, right? Because it literally says not for human consumption. Like, yeah. Can I double the dose? Right? Like that's the kind of conversations that we're having. So we really do have head to toe testimonials. Our most consistent testimonial is people take it in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. Now I'm going to talk about sleep a little bit, because if you think in terms of longevity, if the only thing the product did was improve sleep, that could explain longevity. It could explain, like I mentioned, we know that cancer preventatives are, good sleep is one really good cancer preventative. So if that's all it did, then these rats, that could have been why they didn't have the tumors. That could have been why they lived so long. But yeah, head to toe testimonials. We've got improving hair coming in faster, hair coming in places where it hasn't. By the way, these are all anecdotal. And let me throw in a disclaimer here. The FDA has not evaluated our product. It is not intended to treat, diagnose, prevent, or cure any disease. What I like to say is it's better just to assume none of these anecdotes will happen to you, because that's just where the science is right now. So hair growing in faster, like I said, knee pains. I literally got a testimonial about, just yesterday, a lady talking about her dog having a tumor on its throat and having, I think it was Hashimoto's disease, and is off its meds. Like, the testimonials are bizarre, right? So I'm a science by training, mechanical engineer by training. I'm a scientist. I look at these things analytically. When we were first, and even to today, when we continue to get testimonials, I kind of don't know what to do with them, right? Because I like if you were to give me, George, or you call me up and you say, hey, this amazing thing's happening for me, and I'm like, George, I believe you as one human to another, sharing with me that this happened to you and that you believe it was my product. And of course I like that, but what do I do with that information? Like, how do I take that into well, one, from a legal perspective, how do I take it into a place, and really from a science perspective, how do I take that to a place where I can make a claim about it, right? Because I don't just want to go like, well, this happened to George, and so I need to run out and tell the world that this is what happened to George, because you're one person. And so I still struggle with that. One of our solutions is, we did a sleep study. So this was a survey sleep study where we collected survey data of people's quality of sleep for 10 days prior to taking the product, 10 days on the product, 10 days back off the product, and then 10 days back on the product. 100% across the board, people reported improvements in their sleep when they were taking the product, right? So they would cycle on, cycle off, cycle on. When they were on the product, they did better than their baseline. And so that's kind of one of the studies that we did. One of the things I like to point about sleep, right? Because this is really a little crazy, because you heard me correctly. You take it in the morning, mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. I don't know if you've heard of a book by Dr. Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's an amazing book. I call it the scariest book about sleep that you will ever read, because it's 25 years of documenting the negative physiological impact that lack of sleep has on you, physiological and mental impact that lack of sleep has on you. I call it the Freddy Krueger of sleep books, right? Or Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street. He scared you out of sleep. This book will scare you to sleep, because it is extremely detrimental to go without sleep. In that book, Dr. Matthew Walker talks about the $2 billion sleep aid industry. These are some prescription drugs that physicians are prescribing. My dad was on them. I wish I had gotten him off of them before he passed. And they give them to you right before you go to sleep. And what they do actually is they relax the chemical pressure. There's a chemical called adenosine in our body that builds up throughout the day, causing us to desire sleep. So it relaxes that chemical pressure. So imagine you've gone 10, 20 days in a row where you wake up and you want sleep. And then you take this drug and you wake up and now you don't want sleep. That must feel really refreshing. It must feel like you got a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
The problem is, and the data is very clear, you do not get the REM or the in-REM sleep, the healing and restorative sleep that you actually sleep for when you're taking those depressants. And so I just compare and contrast, because ours, again, you take in the morning, better sleep at night. You know, these prescription drugs that are actually detrimental, you take at night, and you feel relaxed in the morning, but you haven't got the healing and restorative sleep that you need to get while you're sleeping.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense why that would be a very, very dangerous thing and not very good. So
Yeah.
I like it. Throw a little of olive oil right in your mouth or in your coffee and feel better, get better sleep. That sounds like a win-win.
Yeah, we've actually kind of ideated a potential kind of packaging of decaffeinated coffee with our MCT product, and where you could do, but the marketing, this is one of the crazy things, right? How do I market something that improves your focus and energy during the day and gives you better sleep that night, right? If you and I aren't having this conversation and you just read a blurb about something that you could take that would do that, what's your first thought? I mean,
No
it's
way.
got oil in it, so your first thought is probably snake, right? Like, that's probably the thought process, right? And so by having a conversation, so the concept was something along the lines of, none of the caffeine, all of the energy, and twice the sleep. right? Like how do you bridge that gap? And that's one of the challenges that we have from a marketing perspective. It's one of the reasons that I wrote the book. Again, you can find it livelongerandbetterbook.com. And I'm also in the process of putting together a longevity health summit. This is an online summit. You can find a link if you just go to the livelongerandbetterbook.com. You can get a link to my website, and you can try the supplement if you're interested. You can also get the book, and then you can also we don't really have a form to fill out yet for the summit, but if you just submit a form and say, hey, keep us included, we will. We're that summit I'm interviewing, so it's kind of interesting. I did the count yesterday. They had tasked me, so I'm doing this in conjunction with a company called a health summit, called Health Means, and they run about 2 health summits per month. And these are online health summits, and they're like, hey, you need to do about 30 to 35 interviews, and I'm like, that's a lot. That sounds like we're interviewing right now. That's a lot of interviews. And I did the count yesterday, and I'm at 48 interviews with longevity experts. These are doctors. These are people kind of like me who have put together these formulations and have research behind these formulations on solutions for longevity, on solutions for actually the diseases of aging, right? So like Alzheimer's. I just had a conversation yesterday with a guy who's a cancer expert. I mean, just amazing conversations. Amazing for me. I'm very lucky. Like you, I know you enjoy, George, you enjoy doing what you're doing because you get to meet fascinating people. So all of this knowledge from longevity experts is getting crammed into this longevity health summit. It's called Uncovering the Secrets of Longevity, Live Beyond the Norms. And again, you can find that at livelongerandbetterbook.com.
Excellent. Well, Chris, thank you so much for coming on. I'm just going to ask you where we could learn more about you, but livelongerandbetter.com. Pick up your copy of it. Keep an eye out for the Longevity Health Summit. And if you are somebody who wants to be sleeping better, which is all of us, this could be a great solution for you. Thanks again.
Thanks, George, for having me. Thank you.
Until next time, remember, do your part by doing your best.